because some of you don't use it, I'm going to just touch briefly on the ingredients. It's pretty simple. It won't take long. It is just, here we go. So this is Synacos Performer. There is Synacos 1200 as well, which is another product. In fact, let me just get that for you here. So the amino acids and the HA are doing all the work for us. So if we want to understand the science of how it works, we have to understand the science of what the hell is actually in the product. And here is the comparison between both of them. So we've got both the products. I'll just put the 1200 as well. So just touching on the ingredients briefly, we've got high weight and low weight hyaluronic acid. And then we've also got the amino acids. So across both of the products, which amino acids are there and in what ratio are they present? That is the same for both of them. It's not a secret which ones they are. I don't know if it's written here at all. Yeah, there we go. Those are the 6 amino acids. What they are is actually, very openly talked about, because even if you know what they are, it doesn't actually mean you can do anything with it. And the reason is the ratio is what determines the effect. So I'll give you an example. If you look at the bodybuilding industry, we have supplements like BCAAs, branched chain amino acids. If you look very carefully, it's always in a specific ratio. Roughly speaking, it's 2 to 1 to 1, leucine, isoleucine, and valine. Why on earth is that? Because they know even in the bodybuilding industry that ratio is important. That's what determines the effect that you get. It's really simple. Just like if you're going to make, I don't know, some food, there's a ratio between the ingredients. It's not rocket science. And if you get that wrong, it's going to taste horrible. So ratio equals effect. Genuinely that simple. And so when you're looking at products, let's keep with the analogies. When you first look at something simple like BCAAs for bodybuilding or powerlifting, weightlifting, whatever kind of sport like that, again, every single time there's a ratio. In Sunakos, there is a ratio. People think, no, that's nonsense. Anything works. If anything works, why are BCAAs, another amino acid product, in a ratio? It's not a coincidence that amino acid products rely on ratios. And that's what I'm going to talk about today, because that is the crux of how these things work. So what happens is each individual amino acid looks a particular way. And I'm sure many of you know, I'm not a fan of PowerPoint, so I'm actually just going to see if I can make this a little bit more interactive. Okay, I'll share my screen here. New share. That one, share. So let's have a look. Can you all see this screen, by the way? This internet browser window. I'm assuming you can. Let's have a look at these amino acids. Here we go. So, Danny, can you just give me a nod if you can see this? The diagram. Yeah, okay, cool. So if you want to understand the science of this, first of all, you're not just going to understand Sunacos, you're actually going to understand pretty much every product on the market. Let's start with the amino acids, and then we can go into the hyaluronic acid. An amino acid, okay, first of all, why is it called an amino acid? It's because it's made of an amine group and a carboxylic group, and the bit in the middle is what differs. Let me get this up for you. Not that one, this one. Okay. So let me make that bigger. What you see on the left, nitrogen and two hydrogens, that's called an amine group or an amino group. What you see on the right, C double bond oxygen, and then with the hydroxyl group, that's called a carboxyl group. So a substance which has this bit in blue on it is called an amine, some kind of amine. A substance which has this on the right is called a carboxylic acid, just like ethanoic acid, propionic acid, all these things. And so an amino acid is a combination of both of these two functional groups. So amino obviously comes from here, amino, and then this makes it an acid because this hydrogen can come away. That makes it an acid. So it's an amino acid. Now on the top, it's always a hydrogen. That will never change. And underneath, we have a side chain. This is what makes it one of the hundreds of amino acids that exist. We use the letter R because that stands for the word radical. So this is the radical group, sometimes called the side chain, sometimes called the R group. It all means the same thing. We have common structure and we have individual structure. Now, there are over 300, I believe, unless I've found some more recently, amino acids that exist in nature. We're only really concerned with about 20 of them as far as, Homo sapien physiology is concerned. So what we have here determines which amino acid it is. And that in turn determines what we can do with it. So let's now go over here. Sometimes you'll notice that this looks completely different to anything that you look at here. Let's pretend this R is just another hydrogen, okay? That would make it specifically glycine. Let's have a look at glycine here. There. I know when you look at this section here, it looks completely different to what's over here because of different ways of drawing things. So here is the amine group, and here is the carboxylic group. So you've got this carbon here. Every time you've got a turn, that's a carbon. So carbon there. And then either side of here, we've got some hydrogen. But we don't always draw the hydrogen unless it's in a group. So this is glycine. Now, another amino acid in Synocos is alanine. So you've got the carboxylic group, you've got the amino group, and then you've got the side chain. This is the side chain, this is the side chain, this is a side chain, this is a side chain, etc., etc. So depending on what is here, it gives it certain properties. And this is how different products on the market, actually have their effects on the body, on the cell. When you look at people talk about, these are the ingredients. People never bother to actually look at what does the ingredient actually look like on a molecular level. And I don't know why. And I don't understand why the entire industry, in fact, is like this. Some of you I've taught, I think, I recognize some names in the participant list. You'll know if I've taught you. I just start drawing atomic structures like all the time. But when I do that, even though it looks complicated, as soon as you see something, you understand straight away, why it's got specific properties. So if you look at something like, alanine, valine, and leucine here, A, V, and L in nomenclature. So this chain is made up of only carbon and hydrogen. That's why it's not got anything written on it, like oxygen or nitrogen. This is all carbon and hydrogen, okay? Alanine, valine, and leucine, but they get bigger as they go along. Now, if it's just made of carbon and hydrogen, it's what we call aliphatic. Aliphatic compounds are only made of carbon and hydrogen. And, water is made of oxygen and hydrogen, which means it's got the ability to kind of get polarized. Don't worry if you don't understand what that means, we'll go through it. But it basically means that oil-based substances or carbon and hydrogen-based substances like this can't mix with water. That's why when you put oil and water together, they separate. But then we have grades of how much they don't like water, i.e. the hydrophobicity. So this structure here is quite small. This one is a little bit bigger. It's like a triangle. This one here, leucine, is even bigger. It's like a really long tail now. So they're all aliphatic. They're all just carbon and hydrogen, but they're small, medium, and large. So the level of hydrophobicity increases as we go from the small to the large. And I know it sounds really deep and anal and pedantic, but this literally is the science of Synocos. I've just explained to you they're made of carbon and hydrogen, and the bigger they are, the more hydrophobic they are. What do you think happens in Synacos when you inject these? You create a hydrophobic environment. Now, it's easier to appreciate when you go to this level, when you go on a really scientific level where you can actually just look at what a molecule is literally made of, because then it makes sense. If we carry on going towards the right, look at tryptophan. You look how massive that is. A little bit of nitrogen there, but it's still mostly aliphatic. That you can guess compared to the tiny one here. On the right hand side here, this is more hydrophobic than this one here. So if you want to really push away water, we can use things like tryptophan, tyrosine, etc. But then we've got a nitrogen that does other things. We've got a hydroxyl group here on tyrosine that does other things. And so we've got double bonds, which is what these extra dashes are. They do other things. It's also less likely to fit in certain places, so it gives it completely different properties. And so amino acids all have different properties based on this side chain, based on this radical, on this R group. So we use alanine, valine, and leucine. We're including them in the formula because they push away water thanks to this hydrophobicity that we create. And that's really key. What else have we got in Synacos? So we've got alanine, valine, and leucine, like I said. We've also got glycine and proline. Now, these two, they're in a category called special cases. So the reason they're special is because glycine, if I go back here, this R is just a hydrogen. That's it. But we don't draw single hydrogen. So this is a carbon, hydrogen coming here, hydrogen coming here, amine over here, carboxylic over here. This is the center point of the molecule. So hydrogen here and hydrogen here, that means this molecule has some optical properties because it's got a plane of symmetry. I won't go into that because that's a little bit more complex and I might put people to sleep. But it has some optical properties because there's a plane of symmetry. Everything else is more complicated than just a hydrogen in this section. The most simple thing you can do is just add a hydrogen. And so that's why glycine is the smallest, okay? And I'll come back to this. This is key. Please remember that for the next few minutes. This is the smallest one. Bear that in mind. And now I'm going to go through proline. Again, this is the center carbon. We've got an acid if we go that way. We've got an amine group if we go that way. Just like acid here, amine here. So acid here, amine here. And then look at the R group. It comes out a bit like this here, which is alanine, but then it actually loops back around itself, which is really weird. I mean, you look at something like leucine, it comes out and it makes a couple turns here, there, which is the same so far in proline, but this section here is attached on this bit for leucine, which is there. So if you broke this off and put it over here, it would connect back in. And that's what proline is. This is the only amino acid where it connects back into itself in the amine group. And again, I know that sounds like I'm being so detailed in biochemistry, but you are instantaneously about to understand what gives collagen its properties, clearer than any other person who just gets told, use this in collagen. You see, when this connects back in here, this connection is so incredibly rigid. You look at something like this, and the hydrogen that's floating here and here, the whole molecule can twist in 3D space and just turn about all of these joints as much as it wants. But because this is linked back in, this is such a rigid molecule. About here, you can't twist it, you can't turn it, you can't do anything. But that is what is so special about amino acids. I mean, this is what I find so fascinating about amino acids. By slight changes, you create massively different properties and different compounds and different organs and different hair and muscle and medications and all these things. Literally just that line there, if that was here, that would make it leucine. That would make it something that can instigate an insulin release, something that can be implicated in growing muscle mass. But you put it there, suddenly it's not really going to do anything for insulin. Suddenly it makes whatever it's in really rigid and stiff. Are you surprised now that these two are used in collagen very, very much? Now, remember I said about 2 minutes ago, remember that glycine is very small. This R group does not have some complex structure that goes all the way around like this. It's a single tiny hydrogen there. That makes it really, really small, especially when you compare it to something big like tryptophan or glutamine or arginine. Because it's small, glycine and proline are heavily used in collagen strands. Now imagine you're trying to give someone really massive a hug. You can't fit your arms around them. Your hands can't touch each other around the back of them. Now let's pretend you're trying to give a child a hug. Your arms can overlap past each other. And so if you understand that, which I'm sure you all do, it's not a complicated analogy, you understand how collagen gets its structure. Because you've got here glycine, which is tiny. What is collagen? Collagen is a multi-stranded macromolecule. If those strands were really big, they can't fit close to each other. But because glycine is really small, they can fit really tightly packed up against each other. Imagine glycine's R group here was suddenly the size of tryptophan. And you've got a strand over here, and you've got a strand over here. Because the side group is pushing this away, this can't get close enough to give it a hug. Let me show you in the presentation. I've got a little thing for that. You share. There we go. So you should see this now. These are the strands. You can see, whenever I've given this presentation, people just think these are just random molecules, but you can see it's actually quite accurate because you can see this proline ring. Proline is the one that loops around itself. So it loops around because that's the section with proline, or in this case, hydroxyproline. It's been hydroxylated, and then you've got standard proline here. But you can see glycine. There's nothing in this blue R group here. And because it's so small, you haven't got this big thing pushing away. And so these strands can get really close to each other. That's why they can twist like this. And that's why you get compaction in the strand like this, like that. Look at this. Purple is glycine, green is proline, blue is hydroxyproline. So because they're so small, they're compacted. And that stems from the fact that glycine is such a small amino acid. And then there's another thing. Remember I said proline is really rigid around that bond where you can't get twists because it actually loops back on itself. Because of that rigidity, it gives it some strength and function in there. And that's why in the combination of getting close together with glycine, the combination of the rigidity with this, and a combination of them twisting like this, which they can because glycine is small, that's how collagen has its unique properties, because the amino acids it's made of are all unique in their structure and therefore properties. And what's even more unique is the combination of unique amino acids, therefore making something that's a compound, that's a macromolecule that is also unique. And that's why ratio is so bloody important in everything you do. Imagine you just shove a load of glycine. I mean, you're not going to get this, are you? Imagine you shove in a load of proline. Well, the strands can't get close enough to give each other a hug anymore. So you've not got a triple helix. And so it's not just the actual our body structure, which depends on ratio, it's the products as well. And so when you look into the science of synacos, you're looking into the science of amino acids and HA, essentially. Now, if I go back to the amino acid diagram, that one. So if we look at lysine here, look at the size of this R group. It's really quite big. Compare that to this one here, which is alanine. It's really quite small. And so what you can say is this entire section is quite hydrophobic because it's aliphatic. Again, it's carbon and hydrogen. And then you've got this amine group on the end. But notice there's a positive, okay? These are the amino acids with electrically charged side chains. So what happens is this positivity gives it even more properties. So this is like a north end of a magnet, if you like. Imagine you've got a load of stuff in the body that's also made of north ends of a magnet. You put lysine in there, it's going to push it away. And synacos has not just these two, glycine and proline for collagen, and not just these three, alanine, valine, leucine for hydrophobicity, but it has lysine as well. And what happens here, this positivity can actually reject hyaluronic acid. Okay, and we take advantage of that. And I'll explain that as well today. I'll go through the hyaluronic acid portion too. But this is quite large and it is quite strong. This is actually, it's not, the charges aren't on this diagram, but this is actually, one of the most positive, in fact, it's the second most positive side chain of all the amino acids. This is about 10.67 volts here at 25 degrees C. So this is a really big, important property of lysine that we take advantage of. So what happens then when we've seen what happens when you put this in? You've got building blocks of collagen. We've seen what happens when you put alanine, valine, and leucine in. They can push away water in certain ways and in certain amounts. We've seen that this can push away positive stuff. And, on their own, they have their individual properties. But what about when you put all these six together? Well, I'm sure none of you are stupid and you would go, well, you would get some particular effect, particular being the key word. And let's pretend you had the hydrophobicity of these three. Let's say you had 50 of each of these, and then you had one of each of these. And now let's pretend a second concoction where you have one of each of these, 50 of each of these, and then 100 of lysine. You don't have to be a genius to figure out clearly, even though it's the same amino acids, because they've all got different properties, both concoctions, because they've got different ratios of them all, are going to give a completely different effect. Okay, and this is why I went through this level of detail, why I showed you the structure of the collagen in that slide, because you understand the ratio even determines whether it's even collagen or not. So that is the science of the amino acids in Sunakos. It is a specific ratio, and it has to be because amino acids are individual and unique. Now, in strength sports, when you take BCAAs, you're taking leucine, isoleucine, and valine. You're taking these three. Now, again, imagine they've all got slightly different properties because they're different size side chains and they fit together differently. Imagine a completely different ratio of those. Well, you're not going to get the same effect in bodybuilding, are you? And so people that say, oh, Sunakos is 6 amino acids, or you can just use any 6. No, I mean, you haven't got a clue about what amino acids are if you think that. And hopefully now you guys can see that really quite clearly because they're so different. And it's not just which you use, but how much of each that you use. So when we put these together, I'm going to show you the exact effects that it creates, biochemically speaking, in the skin, in your patient. So going back to this is the effect. Now, it's not just an opinion, it's an actual measurable change. I love how you're doing laundry there, Danny. That's just the most entertaining thing I've ever seen. No, don't turn your camera off. It's hilarious. Okay, so back to this slide. This slide represents the fact that when you inject that particular combination in that particular ratio of amino acids, this particular effect is what happens. So here is normal HA. Here is performer. And this bar represents 40. Well, 40 what? 40% reduction in the activity of hyaluronidase, of the enzyme which is breaking down hyaluronic acid. So let's relate to this. This is a study, by the way, if you want to see that. But let's relate this. Give me 1 second for some water. I was speaking all day yesterday and the day before in Germany and Austria, so my voice is gone. Let's relate this to the 6 to try and understand the science behind the amino acid half of the products. So we've got the alanine, valine, and leucine. So what are we using the hydrophobicity for? Well, we push away water. What happens there is the water is then no longer able to attach to the hyaluronic acid that we also inject, which I'll go through. And so that means the hyaluronic acid we inject stays intact for longer. And that's the key. That's the science. It stays intact for longer. The hyaluronic acid, people just go, oh, hyaluronic acid, let's put that in, that will hydrate. Oh, check this new treatment out that I've got, Mr. Smith. I can inject hyaluronic acid into your skin. It gives you all this hydration. That is the most significant cop-out I've ever heard. Hyaluronic acid is so much more than that. If it's just a hydrator, why is it in every single tissue in the entire body? It is a signal molecule. It is an antioxidant. It is anti-inflammatory. It is cushioning for protection. It is activating cells. It is a trigger mechanism for cascades. It is so much more than that. And so if we shove our hyaluronic acid in, and they're all different, just like all the amino acids, we want our specific hyaluronic acid, which is doing work, shall we say, to do that work for as long as possible. We're not doing it to hydrate. That's, it's not mesotherapy. It is a stimulus for the skin. We're activating that fibroblast. And so our hyaluronic acid is doing some work. And if we are using these three to push away the water, our hyaluronic acid stays intact. So there's point number one. Point number two is here. Remember I said lysine is quite long, but also has this positivity on the end. This positivity can actually reject the body's own hyaluronic acid. And what happens there is it stops the interaction between that and hyaluronidase. Because if you push away the hyaluronic acid, you can push away the activity of hyaluronidase. So pushing away water, and we're pushing away hyaluronidase. So let's bring it back to the slide. Wherever it is, there it is. And that's why we get a 40% reduction. Hydrophobic action of the patented 6-AMA. So again, the patent basically means the ratio. Well, the patent is for the ratio, I should say, for the amino acids. And I've just shown you the amino acids that do that. Strongly positively charged lysine, which is what I just spoke about first. So it's the lysine and also the alanine, valine, and leucine. So again, that's why which amino acids in the product are important, but the ratio between them as well. Let's pretend you just pick pick the same six, but in a random ratio. Have you got enough lysine to create enough repulsion? Have you got enough of the others to create repulsion of water? Have you got enough of the glycine and proline to actually create a collagen building block or use as collagen building blocks? This is why the ratio is everything. And anyone that tells you it's not important hasn't got a clue about amino acid biochemistry. And if they wish to learn, I'll show you at the end where you can learn this stuff for free. Let's go to the hyaluronic acid. I'm going to switch the thing I'm sharing again. Where have we gone? There we go. So, hyaluronic acid. I hope your laundry is going well, Danny. Probably shouldn't have said that. Could have carried on having you in the background there. So this is hyaluronic acid. Now, the left half is N-glucuronic acid, and then we've got an acetyl glucosamine. So again, can you see here, carbon, double bond oxygen, and then a hydroxyl group. Let's go back here. Carbon, double bond oxygen, hydroxyl group in 90 degrees. Carbon, double bond oxygen, hydroxyl group, 90 degrees. Technically, this is actually a type of carboxylic acid. And we've got an amine group here as well in the right half of the molecule. And again, this nitrogen is going to be somewhat positive. So this positivity is what makes hyaluronic acid actually very slightly negative in reality. And we can measure that if we wish. But if we go back to the amino acids, this is positive. So what will it do? It will repel other positive things. And this is going to be slightly positive. And so they push each other away. And I really hope, by the way, from now you can, or from all this, you understand why it's important to look at atomic structure. Because there's no point sitting here saying this does this and that does that, because then you just got to remember everything. If you can see something, half the time you can work it out just by looking at it. No one needs to tell you anything, which is why, even though it looks more complicated, it makes things much, much simpler and easier. So I always encourage people, look at the atomic structures, learn atomic structures. It's going to be difficult because you don't understand, nitrogen has 8 electrons on its outside, and, calcium is SSP, SPS, blah, 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 all these sorts of things. But once you get used to it, it's worth the investment, because you can study any product in the market and understand, or any molecule, understand straight away what it can and can't do. And you never have to rely on marketing again. It will take time, but if you give yourself that time and learn it, you're going to be much better off. So this is where the rejection comes with the lysine. And what happens when you inject this hydrogen here comes away, And then this double bond is shared across here, and you get this negativity here. So this N represents the fact that it's polymerized. Depending on how big that number is, you've got low weight, medium weight, and high weight. This is why people say, we've got hyaluronic acid in our product. It's the most, I don't know, I can't swear on this, I don't think, but it's the most ridiculous nonsense thing to say. I mean, this N represents an N for number, okay? Well, is it one? Is it five? Is it 5,000? Americans go around saying, we went to Europe for our holiday. Well, was it Barnsley or Barcelona? Because there's quite a difference, You've got to be specific. And saying we went to Europe for holiday tells people nothing. Like it's the most vague thing you can say. And when you say we have hyaluronic acid, it's again the most vague thing. Because how big is the N? Like, what's the N number? What's the molecular weight? Raj says he likes Barnsley. Shut up, Raj. You live in Wales. Stop pretending you're a Barnsley fan. Yeah, how big is the N? If it's low molecular weight, it's a completely different function in the body to medium and high molecular weight. It's like saying, oh, we use amino acids. Just this picture alone, which you guys have seen now on this webinar, just from looking at that, you're going to go, okay, well, which amino acids? Which is a natural and sensible thing to ask. But if people don't tell you, and they don't tell you how much of each, what the hell is the point of even saying you've got amino acids? It's just as vague. And so this is one of the benefits of looking at atomic structure. You see the myriad of what there is individually, and then probably an infinite number of combinations as well. And it's the same here. Like, how big does this number go? There's a reason why if you look in someone's joint, you're probably going to find like 8 megadaltons of weight or 8,000 kilodaltons, which is going to be really thick and gloopy. Whereas if you look in, what might be made other parts of the body, you might get between 1 and 2 kilodaltons, which is a completely different job, function, mechanism, reason, etc., etc. So the weight determines everything. And I'm going to use that now to go back to the slide. There it is. So in the weight, wherever the hell that's gone. There we go. That's why Synecos states it. 1.2 kilodaltons, so 1,200, hence why it's called 1,200, by the way. And then we've got 200 kilodaltons, or 0.2 kilodaltons. Hey? No, that's wrong. That should be 200. Let me change that. 200 kilodaltons. And this should be 1,200 kilodaltons. So this is one of the few products where they just flat out tell you what the weight is, because this is doing a completely different job to this. Now, the 200, it can attract water, fine, it will, but that's not the purpose of it. The purpose is to do what it says here. It's helping in the synthesis of the proteins that we're looking for, and it can interact with the fibroblasts. It actually gets the work done that we're trying to get done. Whereas this stuff, the heavier stuff, the 1,200, when N equals 1,200, that is basically acting as an anti-inflammatory and an antioxidant, both. And an antioxidant is something that basically protects against free radicals. And if you've got the fibroblast trying to do all this work, there's a picture of one somewhere. So if you've got these fibroblasts trying to do lots of work, but they're getting hit by free radicals, how much work can they really do? If you're in the middle of, injecting a patient, and then, your kid or the patient's kid starts jumping up and down on your leg, pulling your trousers and things, how good is your injection going to be? And to the point of the 1,200, I'll go back to it, wherever it's gone, there. Oops, there. Is it mops up those free radicals. So someone comes in, takes the kid away, so you can inject your patient without having to worry about anything. And that's why we have the different ways. They're doing different jobs. And there's no such thing as which is better. That's like saying, well, choose between your kids. You just can't. It's both of them doing different jobs for different reasons. And the combination of them is what gives us the results that we need. So that's why in the protocol, we have both of them together at the start. And then once we've done the repair work, because that's the effect of putting them both together, they start to repair. Once something's been repaired, you have to keep on repairing it because it's fixed now. That's why you just need the performer afterwards. So I think hopefully that's given a decent understanding of the science behind it and why we use the ingredients that we use. This probably has to be the shortest web. I normally overtalk, and then Danny's sitting there hoping for me to shut up for once. Danny, if you're still there, I'm going to just go through the questions, if there are any. Q&A. There we go. Okay, so no questions. That's fine then. So we can probably call it a day there. I don't know if there's anything else science-wise. That's pretty much all we see in terms of the ingredients and how it works. So I'll just give people 30 seconds or so, because it doesn't look like anyone's got any questions. If the top one is out of stock, can it be added later with the performer in a different appointment? Ideally, you want the 1200 at the start, because that's when the repair is done. If you have to add it later, it's not going to be as good, I would say, but it's adding it later is better than never doing it at all. 200 is low molecular weight. Is that not pro-inflammatory? Absolutely, it's pro-inflammatory. This is why asking for the weight is so crucial. Anyone that uses sub 1,000 kilodaltons is using a pro-inflammatory ingredient, and absolutely, yeah, of course it is. But you've got to understand that inflammation is not a generalized thing. Like there are different types of inflammation, and inflammation is a spectrum. If we're being really technical about it, unfortunately, you never really get taught the different types and how the context and things like that. And so people have this view that it's just this horrible thing. Inflammation is incredible and it's really helpful because it can help you heal things. If you didn't have inflammation, you would never heal. Now, in this context, if you were to have the low weight persisting over a long period of time, not going to mention products that do that, you would get chronic inflammation, which actually would look great because you're swollen and you're probably a bit red. So people go around saying, I'm glowing. No, you're not glowing, you're inflamed. Mike Tyson was glowing when he had a fight with whoever it was that he last had a fight with. That doesn't mean his skin is good. It means he's had a fight. So you have to ask, how is the pro-inflammatory thing being used? Now, in this case, per injection point is the equivalent of 1 milligram. And it is disappearing very, very quickly because all it's doing is starting a reaction to use the amino acids. Once it's done that, it's gone. Like literally probably in 1 to 2 days, it is gone. So there's actually no actual inflammation. There is a trigger, but as soon as the body is triggered into inflaming, it realizes nothing to inflame to because it's just amino acids there. So then it stops. So there's actually no inflammation. There is just a trigger for inflammation. That's all it is. So that's the difference. Good question to ask, and you should actually be asking that to every product, not just Sonocos. Would Sonocos be beneficial for those with keloid scarring beginning to form? I can't really answer that because it's very individual. As every scar is very, very different. If it's starting to form, what I would suggest is you refer them to someone who's used this for scarring like myself. The answer is it can be. The reason I say it can is because it depends how you use it, what the scar is, type of patient, all these sorts of things, medical history, how reactive they are. So it can be, but again, it's off-label, by the way. It's not indicated for scarring. I use it off-label for that. What is the protocol for self-harm scars on the arms? So Raj, what I would say, if scars are already there, again, this is what I personally do and what we've done in some of the cases that I'm sure you've seen. What you want to be, if it's on the body, you want to be using Sunacos body, not the Performer 1200, which are for places like the face, the neck, and the hands. So you want to be using body, and you basically want to be going into the scar as well as just around. So you draw all over the scar, and then you draw a ring around it as well. Each one's probably about 0.1 mil. You're probably going to need a few sessions. It does depend on how thick the fibrotic tissue is, how long it is, etc., etc. Um, you know me, Raj, so if you want any help, just send over some pictures and I can, you got my number and we can just have a little chat if you want. Rebecca says, after the initial 3 to 4 appointments, what is the ideal maintenance protocol? The ideal is actually whatever they can afford, the most they can afford. Now, we say one every 6 months just because that's the balance between effect and economics. But I'm sure some of you probably know I have 6 patients in London that I treat every 2 weeks, literally indefinitely every 2 weeks. In fact, as soon as this webinar ends, I'm actually going over to one of them now. So there's no harm because it's just amino acids and the HA, in the performer is gone. There's nothing left in the skin. And the 1200, how can an anti-inflammatory be harmful? It's the exact opposite of harm. It's anti-inflammatory. Harm is inflammation. So maintenance officially is once every 6 months, not one course, but one single session of the performer every 6 months. But if they can afford more, do it. If they can afford a full course every 6 months, do it. If they can afford, more than every 6 months, do that. Whatever they can afford, the most they can afford is the ideal. And I think, oh, that's the bottom of the chat. Danny, we must have had a record here. 40, that's the quickest I've probably ever shut up, 45 minutes for the
I think it is.
I don't know what's happened today. Motor mouthed it through.
No, it's been amazing, and there is a few extra questions
Oh, okay.
in the chat, but we can either answer them live if you want, or we
Yeah, we
can
can do. Oh,
yeah.
sorry, I
So
didn't
we've
scroll
got
down. I didn't realize I could
that's
scroll.
all right.
Okay, so let's go through them. How soon can you inject again? Do you have to wait 7 to 10 days? I'd say about 14 days. How often would you complete this protocol? I think we've done that in the maintenance thing. Client's got damaged skin. It's one session of 200 performer enough for the repair process. It depends on the amount of damage. Unfortunately, that's an individual question. I can't answer that without seeing the patient. Sometimes yes, sometimes no. Do use cannula around the eye and in white lip. I use cannula only for something called cell, which is for cellulite. For performer, I use needle every time. For 1200, I use needle every time. If you want to use cannula for 1200, fine, no problem. You can get it in the right layer. So no, I don't really use cannula for those areas. What's the rationale of the injection points chosen? Does a difference in facial structures between a Caucasian face and an Asian face require different injection points for more pleasing results? Don't think there's a difference in different races because skin physiology is the same, even if the color of the skin, the shape of the face is different. Rationale of the injection points. Injection points are trying to maximize the area you treat without being stupid with the amount of products that you're using. That's point number one. Point number two is we're using the Langer's line. So we're trying to look at where the line wrinkles actually appear because even though we're all different, the wrinkle orientation, the geometry is actually the same across everyone. Everyone's crow's feet are roughly pointing in the right direction. Everyone's marionette lines are roughly in the same direction, etc. So the rationale is we want to try and go perpendicular to those to try and understand that there's a geometric orientation to protein loss in the skin or elastic fiber loss. So if we can oppose that chemically, biologically, and geometrically, it gives us ideally a better result. What's the one deciding factor that decides whether just Synagos performance suffice or a combination of 1200 will be better? It depends where you're injecting and which appointment it is. Ideally, for me, everywhere I inject, where I use performer, the first session I'll always use 1200 without fail. Some more in the other window. Is it any good for rosacea? So rosacea officially it's off label. It's not indicated to treat rosacea with it. I personally have treated many things off label. I can't think of anything it's not been good for because at the end of the day, you've got to remember, Citygos 1200 is anti-inflammatory. When you're treating an inflamed condition or a condition based around inflammation, an anti-inflammatory is always really going to work. And if you can use amino acids to reset the protein synthesis in that area, you're going to be doing things like just generally increasing the overall health of the skin, the thickness of the skin. As a result, the extracellular matrix will improve. The knock-on effect of that is things like the skin barrier function should start to improve as well. So for me, it's like a universal panacea, if you like, which is why the company, the manufacturer, has products in wound care, in cancer supportive care, in nutrition and obesity management, in rare metabolic disorders, all these sorts of things, because that's the power of amino acids. They can be good for so many things based on which you use and the ratio, which is an infinite number of combinations and ratios. But that's the whole point of the manufacturer. They're just a research and development firm that looks into these ratios and amounts of everything. So I think That is, let me just scroll. No, I think that's everything. If anyone else has anything, please comment. Oh, actually, let me show you where you can learn about these amino acids for free. Let me share my screen. Uh, where is it? There we go. Cool. Let me move this out of the way. So this, feel free to take a screenshot. So I've made a video here. This is an intro to amino acids, basically, and the R groups, what each R group does, how it interacts in the body. And like I said, it is free. So feel free to give that a watch if you wish. I think we're good for questions. If anyone has any final ones, you're welcome to add them here. If not, we can call it a day and let Danny get back to laundry. Is this recorded, Danny?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So is what happened? How do they watch it back if they want to rewatch anything?
So I will send a recording out to everybody who wants the recording sent to them. I've obviously got everybody's email addresses because
Yeah.
they had to join up. So they'll drop you all a post webinar email anyway. And then we can get you the video sent out. Also, if anyone would like to attend any of our training sessions for Sunacos
Yeah.
to kind of use it in person, we've got a couple of sessions coming up. You can visit medeffects.co.uk/training and you'll see all of the locations that we have coming up. But yeah, obviously, any questions, so you can direct them to Dr. Abs or you can come through us at MedEffects. Again, training@medeffects.co.uk is the website, sorry, the inbox, and I'll answer all of those. Or if I can't answer them myself, obviously they will go to Abs.
Whereabouts are you doing the training now, Danny? Just so people can plan
So
which
we
cities
have
to get to.
so we've got training coming up in Milton Keynes. We've got training coming up in Stirling in Scotland. We've got a session with yourself in October coming up. That's
Oh
one of
yeah.
our Sunday sessions, so that's very exciting. That's 85% booked, so we've
Oh,
literally
nice.
got a couple of spaces left on that. That's going very, very quickly. But anyone who's interested in training, please, by all means, as I say, get in contact with us at MedEffects, and we can facilitate that for you.
Someone's just asked about consent forms, Danny. Is that in the portal, the
Yeah,
brand folder?
absolutely.
Cool.
Absolutely. It is,
So when you guys
again,
finish, you'll get access to that, and all your social icons and forms and things
everything.
should be on there.
Yeah, everything's there.
Yeah. That's it, I think. So, yeah, thank
Amazing.
you very
Thanks for your
much,
time
everyone.
tonight, Abs. Really
Thank
appreciate
you for
it.
having me.
No worries. Take
Take care,
care.
guys.
Bye, bye, bye.